Namaskar, you're watching Sansad TV and this is our special program Democracies of the World. The program where we bring you a detailed picture of the latest news of events affecting the democracies across the globe. We'll also talk about the functioning and the makeup of their democratic institutions. In today's edition, we'll talk about Bulgaria, the parliamentary system and its functioning, the nation that held its general elections last week. Over the next half an hour, we'll also talk about the migrant crisis that has intensified in Belarus-Poland border. I'm your host Bhawna Nayar, and today our top focus is on Bulgaria, the country which went to polls third time in 7 months. A new centrist political party has reportedly won Bulgaria's parliamentary election, boosting hopes for an end to months of political deadlock in the European Union's poorest member state. Bulgarians went to polls on November 14 for the third time in 7 months amid a virus surge after no party secured enough support in the previous 2 elections in April and July to form a stable government. On November 14, the country voted for a new president and parliament. Bulgarians had already voted in parliamentary elections in April and July this year, but the country's largest 3 parties failed to produce a working coalition government. Parliament will be dissolved once again and a new caretaker government will now be appointed in the European Union member state. Meanwhile, President Rumen Radev, a harsh critic in Borisov, won 49.2% of votes in a presidential election that also took place in Sunday and is tipped to win a second 5-year term in the largely ceremonial post in a runoff set for November 21. Now let's take a look at the separation of powers in the Republic of Bulgaria and how its parliamentary system works.
Bulgaria's parliamentary representative democratic republic has a multi-party system with the Prime Minister as the head of the government. The government exercises executive power, while legislative power is vested in both the government and the National Assembly. The National Assembly is the unicameral parliament and legislative body of the Republic of Bulgaria. Established in 1879 with Turnover Constitution, it consists of 240 members elected for a 4-year term by proportional representation in multi-seat constituencies. Political parties must garner a minimum of 4% of the national vote to enter the assembly. Parliament enacts laws, approves the budget, schedules presidential elections, selects and dismisses the Prime Minister and other ministers, besides declaring war and deploying troops outside Bulgaria. It is headed and presided by the chairperson of the National Assembly of Bulgaria. In July 1991, the National Assembly adopted a new constitution that establishes a parliamentary government and guarantees direct presidential elections, separation of powers, and freedom of speech, press, conscience, and religion. Under the 1991 constitution, Bulgaria is a parliamentary republic. That is, the Prime Minister is elected by the majority party or coalition of parties in the National Assembly. Elected for a 5-year term, the President is the head of the state. The President is also the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and schedules national referendum and elections for the National Assembly, serves diplomatic and other functions, and can also promulgate and veto laws. According to the Constitution, the nation's governing body, the Council of Ministers, is proposed by the President in consultation with the various groups of the National Assembly and with the majority party's candidate for Prime Minister. The Council of Ministers is the principal organ of the executive branch. It is usually formed by the majority party in Parliament, if one exists, or by the largest party in Parliament along with the coalition partners. Comprising the Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister and Ministers, the Council of Ministers is charged with coordinating and overseeing the implementation of policies on both domestic and foreign issues in accordance with Constitution and laws of Bulgaria. The judiciary is independent of the executive and the legislature. The court system consists of the Supreme Court, the Supreme Administrative Court, local courts, courts of appeal, and military courts. The Constitution provides that specialized courts may also be established.
News now coming in from Brazil, where the incumbent far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has joined hands with the centrist Liberal Party to consolidate his presidential election bid next year. Take a look at the details.
After 2 years without a political party, Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro sealed an agreement with the centrist Liberal Party to back his 2022 re-election bid. According to an official statement, the decision was taken following a meeting between Bolsonaro and Liberal Party leader Valdemar Costa Neto in the capital Brasilia. The move is being considered as the first step by Bolsonaro towards building a campaign for the election next October, when he is likely to face off against former leftist President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. Lula, as da Silva is known universally, holds a handsome lead over Bolsonaro in early polls. Joining one of the parties that forms part of the so-called Central group also signals Bolsonaro shifting course from his 2018 campaign strategy when he sharply criticized their old-school political practices. The far-right president has turned to the Central for political shelter from increasing pressure on his administration, including more than 100 impeachment requests, a Senate investigation into his handling of the COVID-19 pandemic, and plunging popularity. Bolsonaro was elected with the Social Liberal Party in 2018, but left the following year after a dispute with the party's management. Since then, he has not affiliated with any other political party, but he will need one for his re-election bid. The president has seen his poll numbers fall over his mishandling of the pandemic, a weak economy, and rising inflation.
The European Union this week agreed to widen sanctions on Belarus as the migration crisis deepens along with the border with Poland. The EU has accused Belarus of encouraging thousands of people to cross into Poland and other member states to spark a humanitarian crisis in the bloc. Minsk has denied the charges and has threatened to retaliate against any new measures, including by shutting down Russian gas supplies to Europe via pipelines that run through Belarus. It also claims that Belarusian authorities were trying to repatriate stranded migrants, but many were refusing to go.
Migrants, estimated to be around 3,000 to 4,000 in number, remain stranded in freezing conditions on both sides of the Belarus-Poland border. Barred from entering the EU via Poland, as a dispute between the bloc and Minsk, capital of Belarus, continues to escalate. Since August, thousands of men, women and children have amassed at Belarus's western border with Poland. Mostly from Iraq, Syria and Yemen, the migrants are now enduring freezing conditions in the hope of crossing into the European Union. But what's the crisis? Poland and other EU members have accused Belarus of encouraging people to cross the Polish border in revenge for Western sanctions on Minsk over a disputed August 2020 election, which gave longtime President Lukashenko a sixth term and sparked mass anti-government protests. The EU had also imposed sanctions on Minsk over its forced diversion of a passenger jet in May and subsequent arrest of a dissident journalist, Roman Protasevich, who was on board. Angered by the toughened measures, Lukashenko hit back by announcing Belarus would stop trying to prevent undocumented migrants and refugees from reaching the EU, arguing the bloc's sanctions deprived his government of the funds needed to do so. Since then, EU member states bordering Belarus, including Lithuania, Latvia and Poland, have reported sharp increases in the number of people attempting to cross their borders. Poland PM has accused Russian President Vladimir Putin of being behind the migrant crisis. He accused the Russia and Belarusian leaders of trying to destabilize the European Union, which the two countries are not part of. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the Biden administration was calling on Russia to use its influence to push Alexander Lukashenko to cease its callous exploitation and coercion of vulnerable people. Germany has also called on Russia to exercise its influence over Belarus to end the migrant crisis. Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel also held a phone conversation with Lukashenko on the crisis. The talks are the first contact between the Belarusian president and a Western leader after the 2020 presidential elections in Belarus. Human rights groups and global bodies have raised concerns for the migrants' well-being, pointing to a spate of reported deaths on both sides of the border as temperatures slump to below 0 degrees. Aid workers, lawyers and journalists have been prevented from accessing critical border areas on both sides.
News now coming in from Chile. Chile's Senate has voted against removing President Sebastián Piñera over allegations of corruption in the sale of a mining company. The Senate vote on Tuesday fell 29 votes short of the two-thirds majority needed to impeach the president. It ended an impeachment process that had successfully passed a lower house vote last week. If impeached, Piñera could have faced up to 5 years in prison. Piñera was involved in the controversial sale of a mining company in 2010 when he was serving as president for his first term. It was revealed in the Pandora's Papers, which highlighted offshore transactions involving major political figures around the world. Piñera is set to leave office in March next year and is not a candidate in the presidential elections that took place on Sunday. The first round of general election is set for November 21 and Piñera's term ends on March 11th. Time now for a short break. On the other side, we bring you all the details from England's Glasgow, where around 200 parliamentarians from different nations met to stage the UN Climate Change Conference. All this on the other side of the short break. You stay tuned to Sansad TV. Welcome back after the break. You're watching our special program, Democracies of the World. And now talking about the climate change. Climate change is affecting every continent, disrupting lives and economies. Changing weather patterns, rising sea levels are becoming more extreme. According to the World Meteorological Organization, 2019 was the second warmest year ever recorded. WMO analysis revealed that annual global temperatures in 2019 were 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer than period from 1850 to 1900, which is the pre-industrial era. Although greenhouse gas emissions are projected to drop about 6% in 2020 due to the COVID-19 lockdown, this is only temporary. Climate change has not been paused. So in order to shape the 21st century economy in the clean, green, healthy, safe and resilient ways, over 200 parliamentarians from different nations met in England's Glasgow city to stage the United Nations Climate Change Conference COP26 last week. Here's the report.
Over 200 parliamentarians from around the world pledged to take urgent action on climate change at the UN Climate Change Conference. The parliamentary meeting held in the United Kingdom's Glasgow city was co-organized by the Inter-Parliamentary Union. In their final outcome document, the MPs laid out an ambitious roadmap for increased parliamentary engagement to address climate change.
All of us here today are here because we play a crucial role in the success of this global agenda. All of us here today are here because without us, we cannot achieve what the world wants to achieve in terms of preserving our precious planet. All of us are here today because as parliamentarians, we are given a voice.
They underline the importance of parliaments with their core legislative and budgetary functions in ensuring the implementation of the climate change objectives contained in the Paris Agreement, the world's major legally binding international treaty on climate change. The document includes commitments to strengthen the response to the threat of climate change by reducing greenhouse gas emissions to limit the rise of global temperature to well below 2 degrees Celsius. The parliamentarians called for urgent action on climate change.
Science has spoken loud and clear, and the clock is ticking. Irreversible change is happening, is underway. And again, action needs to be taken to avoid a catastrophe. That's why we are here in Glasgow. We came not just to see each other. Of course, we like to see each other. But we came because we know there is a problem and we have responsibilities to solve the problem. COP26 is one opportunity not to be missed in the fight of climate change. And it must deliver in providing solutions from a global and a long-term perspective, including addressing the issue of financing.
We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure our planet. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world into a sustainable and resilient path. As we embark on this collective journey, we pledge that no one will be left behind. This mantra, "no one left behind," resonates even more clearly and poignantly when we consider everything that humanity has endured during the last 18 months of the COVID-19 pandemic.
The conference sessions covered a broad range of topics including food security and climate finance. The parliamentarians also debated how to address the loss and damage caused by climate change. Delegates heard from the climate experts and parliamentarians from various countries and also most vulnerable to the unavoidable impacts of climate change.
News now coming in from Sweden, where the Prime Minister has formally resigned. Swedish centre-left Prime Minister Stefan Löfven formally resigned on November 10th, opening the way for Finance Minister Magdalena Andersson to become the country's first woman premier if she can win Parliament's approval. Löfven has headed a minority coalition since 2014 and declared earlier this year that he would step down ahead of the next general election due in September 2022. Löfven, who has been in power for 7 years, stepped down as the leader of the Social Democrats at the party's Congress. Andersson replaced Löfven as leader of the Social Democrats and is likely to be the Speaker of Parliament's first choice to form a new government. Löfven will lead a caretaker government until a new Prime Minister is installed. And now India and Sri Lanka have set up Parliamentary Friendship Association with Minister Chamal Rajapaksa, the eldest brother in Sri Lanka's ruling clan, as its president. The association existed in the past and is being revived for the current parliament, elected in August 2020. Speaking at an event held at the Parliament complex in Colombo, Sri Lanka's foreign minister pointed to close civilizational ties between India and Sri Lanka while observing that the greatest gift of India to Sri Lanka was Buddhism. Indian High Commissioner Gopal Bagle said that the association would reinvigorate parliament exchanges between the two democracies and strengthen bilateral ties. Russian President Vladimir Putin is all set to visit India for an annual summit next month. His visit is expected to coincide with the delivery of the first batch of S-400 air defense systems. It will be preceded by the inaugural 2+2 dialogue of defense and foreign ministers of India, Russia in Moscow. At the upcoming summit, India and Russia are expected to renew their military technical cooperation arrangement for 2021 to 2031 and sign agreements in defense, trade and science and technology. India-Russia summit could not be held in 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Putin's visit will be the second foreign visit since the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. That's all we have in this edition of our program on the world's democracies. Please connect with us on various social media platforms. You can send in your feedback at Sansad TV at sansad.nic.in. We'll bring you more stories of different democracies in our next edition. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more informative programs on Sansad TV. Goodbye. Namaskar.